I come across an article a couple months ago, and I didn't do a count to go see how many verses here, how many verses there. I didn't even try to look. But basically, the premise of the article was that Jesus speaks of hell more than anyone else. So in Luke 16:26, besides all this, between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot, nor can those from there pass to us. Jesus spoke of a great divide, which means there's two categories. There's obviously a distinction. Now, this is also where the discussion about Hades and hell and the levels typically comes from these verses. So if you hear those discussions, that's where this comes from. And I'm not here to solve that question. That's not my point. But it does point out there is a great divide. And I'm not going to say left and right, as I know where that conversation goes. There are two sides. In Matthew 25, we have the parable of the talents. And in verse 30, and cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, I found it interesting that this talks about the unprofitable servant, and a servant being someone who is serving. And then an unprofitable one would mean that, okay, you're counted as a servant, but then you're judged as to profitable, unprofitable. Again, it's a one answer or the other. Doesn't even address those that could be in the middle. And likewise with the great divide, there's nothing spoke about in the middle. You're either one side or the other. Description of there being two groups being separated. But think about this. Outer darkness. I'm not going to say anything but a single comment. There was a submersible device that imploded. And submariners will tell you that being underwater for long periods of time is very hard. But think about this, outer darkness. What would that be like? It would be, and by the way, you're by yourself. Silence, emptiness, isolation, no one to look upon, no one to talk to, nothing. The closest we could come to that in our daily lives is to go to the quietest room in your house and turn the lights off and just sit there. That's the closest we could come to. But you're still going to feel vibrations in the house. You're still going to hear outside noises. But that's as close as I could think of that we can come to. But think of that, cast into outer darkness. Your senses would have nothing to respond to. Then there's the weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, I did look this up. The best definition I could find amongst a whole list of synonyms around it was grinding teeth together. When would you grind your teeth together? In anguish, in pain, in suffering. So we've got emptiness, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Torment description. And being in torments in Hades, in Luke 16:23, and in Mark 9:44, where their worm does not die. In 48, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. And in Matthew 13:42, and it will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. There's the gnashing of teeth again. There's the fire again. he is painting a picture that strikes exactly against what human nature ever wants to be involved in. Cast out. Think about the parents of the blind man that Jesus healed. They did not want to be cast out of the synagogue. Therefore, they said to the Pharisees, he is of age, ask him. Because they did not want isolated. And that's just a thing here on the earth. They didn't want to be cast out. Have you ever been burned? I made the mistake of playing with a cigarette lighter years ago when they used to put them in the vehicles and you pushed them and I looked at it and it's like, oh yeah, that didn't feel good. That suffered for several days. Yes, I've been burned other ways, but that's the one that sticks in my memory because I had that little spiral print in my thumb for a long time. Imagine now of a fire that's not quenched. So if I'm to use this as my example, I would still be having pain today, 50 years later, of that pain. I still kind of remember, but not really. I remember I didn't like it one bit for a week or so. But think about that, a fire that's unquenched. We've got outer darkness, we've got a fire that's unquenched. I really didn't do a lot of research into the whole about where the worm does not die. But you've got all these things going on that are being described as what it will be like. In the pain, the gnashing of the teeth, and the wailing. I haven't even really touched on the wailing part. I'm going to read this. It's a story familiar. The rich man and Lazarus. There was a certain rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen and fared sumptuously every day. But there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, full of sores, was laid at his gate, desiring to be fed with crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. I'm not sure if that's a sign of anguish or comfort. So it was that the beggar died. And I never thought about this next piece, was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom. And I say that because the rich man also died and was buried. Now, if I take those two verses, the Lazarus was not buried. He was taken by angels. I'm not going to go into that. That's another whole lesson. But just interesting that those verses are there, worded the way they are. And being in torments in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. We're back to the great divide. Then he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me. He says, send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. Of all people to ask to come and do that after you've ignored him for a lifetime. For I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things. Likewise, Lazarus received evil things. But now he is comforted and you are tormented. And besides all this, between us and you, there's a great gulf fixed, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot, and nor can those from there pass to us. And then he said, I beg you, therefore, Father, that you would send him to my father's house. For I have 5 brothers, that he may testify to them, lest they also come to this place of torment. Abraham to him, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. And he said, no, Father Abraham, but if one goes to them from the dead, they will repent. But he said, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded from the one who rises from the dead. There is no return to hell. The life we live is the life we're judged. There is a great divide, and we've read many verses and descriptions using the same words, but it's been repeated many times the same way. So in Matthew 10 and 28, and do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both soul and body in hell. That's the real fear. Go back to the outer darkness. Go back to the weeping and gnashing of teeth. The unquenched fire. So, why did Jesus refer to hell more than anyone else? Why was his description so vivid and to the point? He hits words and descriptions that are exactly what mankind tries to stay out of. You don't jump into a fire. You don't stick your hand against something that's knowingly hot, at least not more than once in your life. He points out things that invoke pain to us as mankind. Torment. That would mean it's ongoing. This burn, it healed 50-some years ago. That's been going. Memory's there, but the pain's gone. Much the same as many ailments and other things and afflictions that any one of you may have. Pain. Anguish. That's a strong word. Gnashing of teeth. Fire. Those are the emotions that he uses. Those are the things that we seek to avoid. So why did Jesus describe hell with such emotions? It's fair to say that nobody in here, regardless of age, is going to go and cause those kinds of things to themselves. That's the answer right there. Why did he go to the cross and suffer those things? Maybe not continual, but he was tormented. He was probably gnashing of his teeth, not openly. He was in pain. He was ridiculed, humiliated. I mean, go down a laundry list of words of things that describe from our position of how he was treated. This morning in class, we were reading about the crown of thorns, and they took the reed and kept hitting on him. Well, that means that every time they hit on this, the thorn went in deeper, and there was more blood that came. Or at least maybe the blood stopped, but the pain got worse. So Jesus speaks in John 15 and 9 through 17. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love, these things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no man than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends, if you do what I command you. Jesus is saying that if we follow his commands, we are his friends. And regardless, he loves us regardless. And if we love him, we are following his commands. And by following his commands means we're being obedient to him. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. So he has revealed everything from God to us. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you so that you will love one another. A few weeks ago on the Wednesday night class, we've been working our way through the gospel. I think it's been 3 years now. And we're almost done with John. And one of the things what we were talking about a few weeks ago was glorifying God. How do we glorify God? We glorify God through our actions. If our actions are obedient to him, we're glorifying God. That goes right back into these verses that talks about he considers us a friend. A friend of his is one who's obedient. And if we're being obedient, we're glorifying God. If we're glorifying God, we're following God. And back to this. We're in. He loves us. He gives us that option to obey him, to avoid, I'm not going back to the other slide, going back to all those other things that he's trying to tell us this is what's going to happen. So this brings us down to a couple of questions. Where are you at with Jesus? And what about your loved ones? They're not always receptive. And that doesn't mean you have to go and take a Bible and put it right in front of their face and start opening things up, but you can have conversations, gentle conversations to start planting seeds. And our job is to teach. It's God's job to make them grow, help them grow. I shouldn't say make, help them grow. But we need to plant seeds. We need to keep ourselves nourished and obedient. Because the consequence is an eternity of all those things that were described. Jesus spent more time talking about hell and what that looks like for one simple reason. Because he loves mankind. Why did God give the earth a second chance with Noah? Because he loved mankind. He knew there was goodness there. It just needed to restart. Come on down the line, he sent Jesus. He gave a second chance for mankind. And it's all back to this. I should have put this at the very end as well, because it really comes back down to love. I made the comment in the Wednesday night class, I've decided that the book of John is all about love. Because it constantly talks about, more than the other three gospels, it talks more and more and more about how much Jesus loves us and how much he's done for us. And then when you think about, he talked about hell and what it is, he describes it, he's only doing that for one reason. Because he knows what the course, he knows what the timeline and progression of events is going to be. He does that because he loves us and he wants us to be obedient. He wants us to be with him. I didn't put the verse in here, but there's a verse that says that those who follow, those who are obedient are Jesus. Those who are not obedient are God's. We all know what the Old Testament says about what God did to the Israelites every time they got way off track and he needed to bring them back, whether it be captivities or it be wandering in a desert for 40 years instead of just walking the straight line and getting to Canaan. And he banished them except for Caleb and Joshua that never got to see the promised land. I mean, those are just, and us reading those seem like little things, but if you're there, the one experiencing those are monumental, because that's affecting your life here. But think about, as we go on throughout our days. Where are we at? And where are those round about us at?